watch each and every day. That's all I heard. I heard nothing else in there. We are on Sportsmanlike, presented by Progressive Insurance. There is a reason that Canty's comments about Micah Parsons were discussed yesterday on First Take. Now, to be fair, not all of the comments were actually discussed on First Take, because everything Stephen A. said is what CC has agreed with, which set up the whole point about Micah Parsons. But wait, there's more, because we're going to get to that part. So the news part, this per DallasCowboys.com, their website, Micah Parsons spoke to them, and many people believe that the current general manager, Jerry Jones, is a quote-unquote unqualified GM. Well, let me add another unqualified GM based on that, and that's Micah Parsons. Quote, I don't want to sit back and just watch other people build and build and build, and us stay the same. So we definitely need some call to action. I want to see us be aggressive, and I want to see us get players that's going to help us. It's going to come in and make an impact, he said, of his ideal approach to free agency. And I want to see us bring back our own players that are just as important, and let's see what we can do there. There's been a new wave in the NFL. You saw it with the Rams, and even though they drafted some of those guys, you can always hit like that. You know what I mean? The 49ers went and got Javon Hargrave, who I don't know was great for them, by the way, and then went out and got some impactful players on that side of the ball. There is some success to it. You look at Philadelphia, how they went out and got Saquon Barkley, and how they went out and got Zach Bond. Side note, Zach Bond was not a high-priced free agent. Everyone doesn't need a max deal, which is what he's saying. There are great quality players that can do 1 or 2 year deals. Obviously, we've seen that this year. There's been a trend, end quote. How, guys? Can they do that exactly?
I don't know what Micah Parsons is talking about. The guys that the Rams have on the defensive side of the ball, they drafted all them dudes. They drafted Braden Fish. They drafted Kobe Turner. They drafted Byron Young. They drafted Jared Verse. Those are all draft picks. So if Micah Parsons is saying the Cowboys need to continue to build through the draft, okay, that's a great conversation to be had. Only problem is the Dallas Cowboys only have 3 picks in the first 4 rounds. So how do they get said draft picks in order to continue to fortify that roster? The answer is trading Micah Parsons. Like, I see where he's going in terms of wanting the organization to be more aggressive in free agency. And we all assume that if you're in your window to compete for a championship, you are going to do whatever it takes to supplement your roster. You'll move heaven and earth. You'll restructure contracts. You'll add voidable years, all of the things that we see teams like the Philadelphia Eagles do. Only problem is the Cowboys typically don't do business like that. And Jerry Jones waits till the 11th hour to extend players, thereby allowing the entirety of the offseason to pass without fortifying that team. So here's the dilemma that the Dallas Cowboys are in, since we want to, get it down to actual numbers. They have 25 free agents this year. They're $3 million over the cap. So if you want to talk about being active in free agency, a big piece of that is re-signing your own. Trying to bring back guys like Osa Odigizua, who is going to get a bag of money. Trying to see if you can work out something with Zach Martin. Trying to see if you can work out something with Tank Lawrence. That's your free agency right there. And then, okay, there's the potential Micah Parsons extension if they don't decide to deal him. I guess the whole point that I'm making is, how are the Dallas Cowboys going to be any different next year than they were this season if they retain all of those players? The answer is they're not. So for all of the cap space that we could be talking about the Dallas Cowboys creating to go shopping in free agency, a lot of that is going to be dedicated to trying to retain their own. And if they're not going to bring those guys back, then the Cowboys are acknowledging that it's time for them to go into a rebuild. And if they're going into a rebuild, why the hell are you going to pay Micah Parsons $35 million a year?
Because he's a star. And because he's incredible at what he does. And it feels like right now that's what the Dallas Cowboys are. No pun intended. I know there's a star on the helmet, but it feels like they're a collection of stars and not the best team that they can be. They maybe are bringing in elite individuals, but right now it doesn't feel like a team. I mean, compare the Dallas Cowboys to the Philadelphia Eagles. You're talking about the numbers and how to make it work. I even think about Micah Parsons talking about what he wants to build or see built in Dallas. And I always go back to Jerry Jones. We just watched a team in their division win the Super Bowl. And the way that Jalen Hurts and those guys on that team are so selfless, the way they look out for one another, the way they pull the rope the same way, the way that they all have one singular goal in mind, and that was to win a championship, that doesn't exist in Dallas. In Dallas, it's all about the individuals. And Micah Parsons is saying that he wants the team to go out there and get aggressive. He mentioned Saquon. Well, your owner and GM didn't even call Derrick Henry last year. Why would we think that this year's approach is going to be any different? He went out and hired a head coach that had less success than the guy that was there, but that was also a continuation of what was happening. So why do we think that all of a sudden they're going to take a different and more aggressive approach in how they build their team, and as an extension of that, build their culture? I appreciate him going out there and publicly doing the Joe Burrow and outlining some of the things that he wants because he's put it on wax. But I hate to break it to Micah Parsons, from where I sit, I don't see how he's going to get anything near what he wants in Dallas because their owner and GM doesn't have that approach.
Well, the other crazy part of this, football, kind of like basketball, kind of like hockey, and very different than baseball because there's no salary cap. There are specific times where you can go get guys based on when other guys have big money that hits. And the Dallas Cowboys had a window where they could really go get guys, and they didn't take advantage of it because they just did everything backwards. And that window was last offseason. That if we've gone through this a million times, but it bears repeating. If you would have signed Dak Prescott early, which seemed like an obvious guy to sign early, if you would have signed CeeDee Lamb early, again, if you're going to sign him at all, if you believe in paying wide receivers, which they do, it seems like an obvious guy to sign early. They didn't do either of the two.
You could have saved $20 million against the cap if you signed him at the beginning of the offseason rather than before training camp. And that $20 million could be used, I don't know, for a guy like Derrick Henry.
And you would have had leftovers.
How did that look for the Baltimore Ravens? And I guess that's the point. That's the point.
Micah Parsons is a year late on these comments.
Yeah, they missed the window. Like it's clear and obvious. The Cowboys can either be bad or they can be worse. Take your pick. They can be bad, which is trying to, keep their guys in place and kick the can on a Micah Parsons contract extension. Or they could be worse, which is extend Micah Parsons, have $150 million in cap in 3 players, and let all of these impending free agents go, which make up the core of your team. Mm-hmm. You pick. Like you're either going to be bad, which is running it back with the same cast of characters from last year, or you can be worse, which is paying Micah Parsons and letting all of those other free agents go and not having any money to go shopping. Those are the choices, and none of them are good. Which is why I kept saying this past week, trade Micah Parsons. It's the only thing you have of value that other people want. It doesn't make sense to keep this guy knowing that your team is about to go through a rebuild. They're the 3rd best team in their own division at best, and their division ain't even the best in the conference. It seems so obvious to me what the Cowboys are going to have to do. And I know that fans don't want to hear it because of how special Micah Parsons is, and I agree with them. And from a team-building philosophy, I'm against letting go of 25-year-old all-pro pass rushers. But Micah Parsons didn't do you a hell of a lot of good with the team that you had out there last year, and I struggle to see how that group gets any better when you pay him $35 million a year to go along with a $35 million a year wide receiver, to go along with a $60 million a year quarterback. So if you're frustrated at the Cowboys being in this position, be mad at Jerry Jones because of how he staggered these contracts when he paid these guys and not doing more and not being aggressive in the window that he had to win a championship.
Mm-hmm. That very take right there, which seemed unbelievably fair and reasoned on our show this week. And when you made it for the first time, I remember I literally reacted and said, welcome aboard, because to what you just said, as a longtime defensive player, 11 years in this league, exactly what you just said, have every right to sit there and say, I'm not trading the 25-year-old megastar. Stop bringing that up. And you got to a place where you thought otherwise. But that take right there caused chaos yesterday on First Take.